Maple Leafs forever on the Fired Up.
Hey, everybody, this is Joseph Hasek, and welcome to the Fired Up Network. Welcome to Leafs Forever Game 5 preview. I had to bring the big guns here. Of course, broadcasting legend Stormin Norman, who never changes his tank top since the Maple Leafs going to win tonight. And should I mention the formerly, because I'm used to saying Toronto Star, formerly the Toronto Star, Mark Zwolinski, the famed writer who wrote a book called Norma. Norm. He wrote a book called Norma, your ex-girlfriend, 95 years old. All right. So game 5 here
we'll take that, Norm.
Bank Arena. The series now tied up at 2. If you listen to Craig Berube practice yesterday and sort of today, at lineup changes. Mark, what do you hear?
They're keeping it close to the vest, but I think two things will happen. Nick Robertson get in. He's usually really good after sitting, and I think he hasn't played since Game 3 against Ottawa.
Yeah.
But he's usually really good in games that he plays in after he's been, sat out or scratched or whatever. He scores, and let's face it, they could use some scoring. And I'm gonna, I would think, and I don't know how ready Kampf is, but if he is ready, I would put him in and maybe get McMahon or somebody out. Just get Kampf in there. And the reason I say Kampf is, I think it'd be wise to get him obviously back on the PK and get Matthews off. Just let Matthews focus on the power play and on 5-on-5. All this extra. I don't know what you guys know or what you think, Norm or Joe, about Matthews' health. I don't know what's up. Obviously you're going to open your eyes and say something because he hasn't scored. So one, they need some extra scoring or could use it. Everybody could use it. But two, I think if they just focus Matthews on 5-on-5 and then the power play, that he'll snap out of it. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's why I would, I'm going to assume Robinson's coming in, and I would bet on that. But Kampf, if he's healthy, get him in there for those specific reasons. But I don't know what you guys think about that.
And no, that's a good suggestion. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson is going to play. He's going to play today. So, but it looks like Stolarz will not play, and Wall will be the goaltender and all that. And let's before I get to Norm here, what about the Panthers owner taking off social media and all? And he says Canadians not well. Well, Donald Trump has talked to this guy, it looks like. So what do you think of that? Could that be sort of a subtle change in the series?
Good question. I mean, it's got to trickle down into the dressing room, and people are going to shake their head. As far as the distraction, I'm sure these guys have faced far more, prominent and or just in your face things like that from. They probably hear stuff like that on their own social media. It's crap, it's almost not even worth talking about because this, that particular person should have given his position and his success in life, should have a little bit more awareness about saying, just unnecessarily hurtful and stupid things like that. But I think, the NHL will deal with it, how they deal with it, and let that be on a side. Could it affect the dressing room? I mean, if it does, they're focusing on the wrong things. But nonetheless, he is a part of their organization and not just a minor part of it. He is at the top, right at near the top of the totem pole. So you got to wonder, how those things happen in the first place. We could talk forever about it. And, the person who got it out of him is a baiter too. But I hope it isn't. And it's something I think for my personal thing to talk about it, but then once you talk about it for a few minutes, let it go and just let's focus on what's on the ice because that stuff, there's too much of that in our society and, people tweeting stuff all the time, hurtful. I still get it. And, it's there's more important things to talk about and more pleasant things to talk about. Let's for me, that's what I'd like to say.
All right, Norm. What do you expect tonight here at the Scotiabank Arena? I know you want Wendell Clark to come back because they need some checking and all that, but do you expect Tkachuk to go after William Nylander. The last scene we saw in Game 4 was Tkachuk warning Nylander. And how physical do you think Game 5 is going to be?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen Matthew Tkachuk go over the top with physicality, but and I kind of wonder if he's playing with a bit of an injury of some kind. He's playing good, but he hasn't been the kind of, disturber, leave out the first word, that associate with Matthew Tkachuk. I mean that as a compliment, as one of the premier power forwards in the National Hockey League, along with his brother Brady. So, I'm sure he'll be good on his word, and he's, he's good at getting under people's skin because he can back up the talk and walk the walk. So I expect him, as the series goes along, to do even more of that, is to be chirping players and to be, finishing his checks. And also the factor that's a big factor is Bobrovsky looked more like Bobrovsky in the last game, which he didn't in the first two games. I was like, who's this guy in net for Florida? Doesn't look like the Stanley Cup champion who stole so many, goals and stole so many periods last year. So a lot of tonight's game, will depend on Bobrovsky. And if he plays like that, like a Vezina caliber goalkeeper or an MVP, a Stanley Cup MVP type goalkeeper, because that's what you need to win a series. And if Stolarz is out and Bobrovsky is in, obviously Bobrovsky will be in, then I think Florida has a little bit of an edge in goal if it's the Bobrovsky we saw in the previous game, where he was stopping one-on-one breakaways. In the first two games, he wasn't. It looks like they were going short side on him or on the left side of the net. They were going a little bit above the blocker or the glove, and they were having some success with that on breaks. So a lot of this game will hinge on Bobrovsky, and if he's the Bobrovsky that we've seen in the playoffs the last couple of years, or the one we saw in the first two games against Toronto where he looked rather ordinary. So I think that's a huge factor in tonight's game, aside from whoever the Leafs put in. And as far as Florida management, ownership person chirping about the 51st state, is like, once the puck drops, you would hope the Leafs are focused on the puck and who's in front of them, and not what, some guy in a three-piece suit had to say about Trumpian type politics and all this stuff that's upset so many Canadians. So that's the thing. I don't think anyone has to worry about that. Athletes at that level have learned to focus. The Leafs used to have a much more controversial owner in the late Harold Ballard, who said all kinds of stuff that would upset people in Toronto or in other places. So even with his own players, he would say stuff that would upset the dressing room. And for the most part, they still managed to focus. So I don't think these guys are going to be, they'll probably just, read it and roll their eyes, and that'll be about it. And I'm sure Paul Maurice told his players, just focus on the game. Don't get involved in stuff that's outside of the dressing room.
All right, so before we get to the Leafs, I want to touch on the other series here. Edmonton looking amazing, 3-1 lead tonight against Vegas, and then a little bit worrisome for Winnipeg. They're down 3-1 to Dallas, and like I said here, the Leafs are, and Mark, you should hear this. I said at the beginning of this, those are going to get through Florida and play Carolina. The last time they played Carolina was in the Eastern Conference Final, where they lost. But this year, maybe, just maybe, Norm could get some leaf blowers and all that, and become that he wouldn't trade Clark for Fedorov and all that, the good old times. And we see a Stanley Cup, not a victory, just go to the Stanley Cup. But what do you expect tonight? What's the score? Give me everything. Let's start off with you, Mark.
Tight score. Are we talking about
The
Oilers
Leafs,
tonight?
the Leafs, back to the Leafs, and any other point that you want to make about the other series.
Well, I just on further to Norm's point, which is a classic one and a well-founded one, goaltending. Oilers series, Stewart came in and did well. Did like unexpectedly well. He was Skinner, pardon me.
Yeah.
Came in and did extremely well, and was on the spot for that too, and commendable. Whereas in the Jet series, Hellebuck's not been like he was in the regular season, and he's getting beaten in the same spots that Norm was talking about. Glove and then high bar down. He's had He's had hat trick scored against him. It's just not like him, and things happen in the playoffs that don't happen in the regular season. Just other things. They expose you for things, and then fluky things, bounce things that happen there that don't happen anywhere else. Goaltending is going to be crucial, probably the most important thing overall, not only in this series, but in whoever advances out of this series and moves forward to the Cup. I think Woll can do the job. Stolarz is a little bit different goalie because he's a lot larger and he covers more space, and he's extremely athletic for the size of goalie he is. But we see what goalies, with bounce back Bobrovsky to whatever we're going to get out of him, to Woll. There's an old saying that your goalie isn't your best player on the ice, but he's your most important player on your ice. But I think in the playoffs, he better be both, or else you're in trouble because the old Grant Fuhr thing, let in one less goal than the opposition. But here, if we expect a tight game, and I think we'll get one, Woll has to do as good. He's got to match Bobrovsky on the scoreboard and in performance. That's a lot to ask because Bobrovsky's, if he isn't the best, he's top two. So Woll's got to match that, and we'll see. I think Woll can do it. He's an extremely bright kid. I think this is the opportunity he wants because he gets better as if he plays every single game. That's basically what he said himself, that the more he plays, the better he gets. So here we are. We'll see what happens. But I'm just underlining Norm's point, well-founded point, that goaltending is extremely important and will be a very big factor in what we see moving forward.
And not only goaltending tonight, I believe, this is my prediction, I don't know what Norm says or you say, Austin Matthews will come off and score not one, but 2 goals at least tonight. Mm-hmm. Austin Matthews will come off and score at least 2 goals tonight. What do you say, Norm?
Well, I'm not going to predict that because he's been struggling. He has been struggling. 2 assists in the series so far. For a team captain and for, not his fault. He gets paid what he gets paid. So the money isn't really the issue here. It's just that he's one of the best players in the National Hockey League and certainly the most notable star on the Maple Leafs. I guess you can put him 1 and 1A with Marner. Marner's a heck of a player also. They need him. They need him to take advantage of his opportunities, and we'll see what happens. A lot of that will depend on, as Mark and I have been saying, on Mr. Bobrovsky. And when he's on his game, Bobrovsky is a magician. When he's not, he's kind of ordinary, right? He can make some good saves, but sometimes shots will beat him. You say, "What? You beat Bobrovsky there? What's going on?" And we saw that in the first 2 games. So I think we're looking at regardless of who scores, Joe, I don't think it really matters who scores. Quite frankly, being old enough to remember the 60s Maple Leafs with their 4 Stanley Cups in 10 years, they won Stanley Cups in large part because of guys like Dave Keon, one of the best skating center icemen in the National Hockey League in his era, and also because of their goalkeeping, but also because they would get scoring from their second and third lines and sometimes from their defensemen, i.e., even though it was a bit of a fluke goal, Bob Bond on a broken ankle in 1964. I know I'm talking about stuff that folks wouldn't remember, but I just want to point out that Maple Leaf team won Stanley Cups not by flukes, but because they had dominance at center ice. They were solid in goal with John Bauer and Terry Sawchuk in '67, their last Stanley Cup. And because they would get scoring from different players on the roster, not just their best players. So that's what the Maple Leafs need to keep doing. When you get guys like Domi, scoring goals, or Nyes, those guys, you need guys like that to step up, because you can expect that Matthews and Marner are going to see double, triple teams depending on where they're playing and what part of the zone they're playing in. So that's going to be hugely important. So I don't think it really matters. It would be huge for Austin Matthews to sort of get the suitcase off his back. And if he popped a few goals, that would cool out the conversation a little bit, especially when you get to this stage where it's a best 2 of 3. But realistically, teams that win Stanley Cups get scoring from all over the place and sometimes from unexpected sources. And if the Leafs win the game, I don't think too many people will still be overly focused on Austin Matthews. If he gets a point or two, or even if he doesn't get any points, it'll still be a conversation point. But if they win, that whoever wins tonight, goes into the driver's seat. I think we're looking at an overtime game. I really do. I think both teams know what's on the line, and they're going to tighten up defensively. And aside from the chirping, the chirping is fine, but nobody wants to be in the penalty box watching the other team score on a power play. So I think both teams are smart enough to avoid unnecessary penalties. The other stuff can come at the end of the game when it's been decided, if you want to have a sweater tugging match or whatever. But that's strictly that's mostly for entertainment as far as I'm concerned. So I think we're looking at overtime, and I'd say it's a pick 'em, flip a coin. Could go either way, because overtime goals aren't necessarily the best. Sometimes they're flukes. We've seen that a few times in some of the other rounds too. Deflection off a skate, or deflection come off of anything. Even that Bob Baum goal I was referring to in 1964, that hit Bill Gadsby in the rear end and went into the Detroit Red Wings net. So funny thing, because Bob Baum and Bill Gadsby were good friends, so he used to joke with him about that for a long time. How he took a shot and it hit his derriere and went into the Red Wings net. So you never know what part of the body's going to get an assist or where a puck's going to deflect from. But that's the beauty of the Stanley Cup playoffs, Mark and Joe. We've seen a lot of those over the years. They're not the most beautiful, but they all count, that's for sure.
All right, so like usual, Norm takes 20 minutes and doesn't give me a prediction. Leafs or Florida, which one?
All right.
You go first. Well, you want me to go or you go, Norm?
Yeah. Well, my original call was Florida in 7, so I don't want to be like a swing with the popular vote. The popular vote would say Maple Leafs win. So just for the heck of it, I have to pick one. So I'll pick Florida to win in overtime. But I think it's going to be this will be the tightest game of the series so far.
Mark?
I haven't done your show in a while, and so I haven't tipped my hat. I have been telling my wife all along that I think the Leafs will win the Cup, and I still maintain that. I just think, again, because of goaltending, I was saying that more when Stolarz was healthy. I think he will get healthy. I don't think he'll play in this series, but he will get healthy. I'm going to stick with that. I really like Florida's game. I love the hockey in the Western Conference. I still can't believe St. Louis and Colorado are done because they both could win the Cup. Dallas has got to be sitting there and thinking, this is our year. Oilers got to think it's, if we don't do it this year, or at least get back to the final, then, but they could do it again next year. But, they've got to take advantage of the greatest player in the game and, this year's greatest scorer in Draisaitl. So that stuff is that every game in that Western Conference so far has just been spellbinding. Great hockey. But in the East, I mean, this was the Leafs' hurdle. Florida's their, it's not just a hurdle. It's a 20-foot high wall, and they're going to try and jump it in a pair of sneakers with springs in them, right? Something like that. But I think they can get past Florida. I think the fact they have 2 home games will really help. And I agree with Norm that it should go 7. But yeah, I've been flapping my gums about the Leafs this year, possibly because I'm retired and my brain's a little looser. But away we go. I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to stick with the Leafs, not only winning this, but getting and winning the cup.
All right, final question as we close out Leafs forever here. I think it's not going to be close. I think the Leafs will win by 2 or 3, go 5-2, 5-3. That's what I think. But Mark, I'm going to ask you, because me and Norm talk about this all the time. What do you do with Mitch Marner? What do you do with John Tavares? Matthew Knies, it looks like he's going to get a $9 million raise. Where do you find all the money here? First, let's get to Matthews or Marner. What do you do with Marner?
Give Marner his money. Plain and simple. Still got probably 4 to 5 good years left in him. He's been the Leafs' best player last year and this year. Matthews has already got his money. Knies will get he's going to get a raise. They might give him 5 years. So, lock him up for 5 years at if they could get him at $5 to $6 million, the type of money they didn't give to Hyman, they would be getting a steal. I think Knies has probably been their best day-to-day player over the last month or 2 months of the season, and now in the playoffs. So that's there. But Tavares, I'd bring him back, but at a obviously highly reduced rate. And I think Tavares would expect that. I think Tavares would probably want to finish his career out here. And if he comes back at something, under 5, under 4, under 3 even, that's kind of stretching it. But you're going to get, probably a very motivated veteran player who wants to play, who's getting into shape and proving that he can last the season. I think Tavares has had probably his best season this year in the last 3. But if you can get him at reduced, great. But and how you fit them all under the cap, yeah, that's another question. I don't know how much longer they have Knies under control. I think at least for next year, so they can deal with that next year. They can still just keep him, and I think the smart thing would do is to sign him up and get him tied up for 5 years or 4 or 5 or 3 or whatever, get some cost certainty there, and then give him his money. A massive contract that say even in 3 years, if he's like what he is now, yeah, he's got money is the least of his worries. He's got 2 major contracts coming to him. He's 22 years old. He will be $100 million richer by the time he's out of this game, or even more. So money's is the least of his worries. Marner, this is the probably penultimate contract in his career, and he'll be paid accordingly. And if you want to talk about, well, then what do you do if you don't sign him? Do you move him, or I think it's too late for that. You got to extend him or whatever, or you lose or whatever. You're going to lose. I don't think any of that really seriously enters the equation. I think it's a one-way equation. You sign him. I could be missing something there, but to me, you sign him. Nice. Tavares, if you bring him back or if you don't, you can still fill that hole. But if you've got that top line intact, you've got competitive playoff hockey in Toronto for another at least 3 to 5, let's call it. Very competitive, deep run teams. So I think that's a no-brainer. But again, there's obviously a flip side to that coin. But to me, yeah, if you've got the money to fit it, you fit it. Or you fit it regardless of the money, then you worry about everything else after that.
All right, as we close it up, Mark, let's promote your books. I like reading your books during Chelsea soccer matches. So I know Norm does also. So go ahead. How's Norma? How's I think that baseball book there, the glove and all that. Any new books? Because I know Norm wants to read some stuff. So go ahead.
Well, thank you. You guys are too kind to me, and giving me a plug here. And I've, I was talking about that the baseball book I did, the fictional account of a minor leaguer going through baseball up to the big leagues, and his coming of life story as told by his baseball glove, which is kind of an offbeat way to tell it, but the glove narrates the story. I actually have that book in front of 3 publishers right now. Wow. Keeping my fingers crossed for a response. It's my wife, actually, Iris, is a real estate agent. She's someone she sold a house for, is connected in the publishing world. So I got a break there. He's a very nice guy. And we're just, like I said, keeping our fingers crossed. I actually sent the manuscript out last week. It's going to take time for them to read this. I may have to hire an agent because I can't remember the name of the publishing house, but they generally do not accept manuscripts handed to them by an author. They want to deal with an agent only. I can understand that. It's just probably just like an NHL contract. How many players represent themselves? Virtually none, I think. But that is where that's at. I'm actually quite excited about it. I've got a lot of faith in this book, and every author does. Every author is going to tell you he's the next Ernest Hemingway, he or she. But yeah, I have a lot of faith in this, and again, I appreciate you guys mentioning it, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed and move on if nothing happens. But hopefully something does. Like I said, I've got 3 publishers looking at it, and I think it's terrific that they're actually looking at it, right? Because the publishing world's on its knees, just like the newspaper business and everything else, right? It's not an easy time for book publishers. So the fact that they want to look at something that's not a story about an athlete or anything, a sports book that's purely fiction, I feel like I've won already, just like that. So thank you, and we'll see what happens. I should find out within a month.
All right, Norm, any last comment here?
No, just looking forward to the rest of the playoff series. Be nice if we could have an all-Canadian Stanley Cup final.
Bingo.
That would be something. It looks like Winnipeg is in tough shape, but Edmonton's been looking good.
Yeah,
and
great.
Matthews and Marner versus McDavid and Draisaitl. Oh boy, that would be worth booking off work for.
That would be seismic. It'd be an epic.
And guarantees that Canada wins the Stanley Cup and Bettman gets fired. So put it that way. So I know Trump will want to fight right away there. But Norm, I haven't talked to you since your 700th birthday. How was your 700th? He's laughing. Look,
Normie, don't take that.
700th birthday. He knows that. How was it? And out of this panel, who gave you a present?
Out of this panel. Well, Mark gave me a present with his presence on the show. How do you like that, Joe?
Listen, I'm the president of Canada. Come on.
The host is exceeding his parameters as a host here.
Yeah. How was your birthday and all that? And hopefully you have many, many more.
Yeah, no, it was a nice birthday. I spent time with my family. And ordinarily would have been my 70th, but Joe, I've aged several decades working with you over the years, so that's why you correctly put it up to 700.
Yeah, see, at least he recognizes he's 700 years old. He still has teeth. His hair is there. He wears a little bit of glasses. But I got it, Mark. We got him into the biggest Leaf fan again. Come on.
He's too smart for that.
All right. Again, you're watching Maple Leafs for Game 6. We'll go down Friday, either 7, 7:30, or 8. If the Oilers win tonight, it's going to be at 8 p.m. It's only game on Friday. And maybe if there's a Game 7, it's back here, Scotiabank Arena on Sunday. All right. Norm says, what's a Florida, right?
For tonight, yeah. Yeah.
And Mark says that the Maple Leafs, Mark's going to be right. Norm, as always, is always wrong. All right. Mark, what do you think? Final question, not about the Maple Leafs, about the $600 million man, Vlad Guerrero. You were a baseball player. Did you ever think somebody would make $600 million?
No. I made $400 a month in the minor leagues.
That's their daily meal limit, $400. Come on.
Right. He could $400. I think he could just throw them out on New Year's Eve, in a packet of about 10,000 of them if you wanted. No, it's exceptional. And it only raises the bar for other players. And this is why you see these astronomical numbers and super agents. If you think about if I had a son or a daughter going into pro sports these days, the financial opportunities are astronomical. The sky truly is the limit. And that's because of contracts like this, but also because of people like Norm spoke about in the 60s in hockey and baseball and everything, who laid down those foundations and, allowed for these numbers to escalate as the years go by. And is Guerrero a $500 million play? I don't think anyone is. Like if I just threw out all the context and just said, is any athlete worth that money? No, they're not. But the game, it's not just the athlete. It's the game. It's the business. It's, what is Rogers worth? The owner of the team, billions. So this, if you want to play, you got to pay. But pay is part of the whole thing, and it's a theater now as much as it is a sport. And this only adds to it. So, hey, good for Vlad. He hung out. He wanted to be here. He got his dream come true. He's going to make $35 million a year for the next 14 years. I don't see how there's anything negative in that for him. As for the rest of us, you can cut it up or whatever. But really, it's just part of the way that sports is run these days. Big money is a part of the game as much as skill and anything else. So, hey, good for him. And I hope it rubs off on the Blue Jays in a way that, allows them to maximize the talent they have, because I think they're a good team. They're just really struggling with certain aspects of their game. One day it's pitching, one day it's hitting, whatever it is. But, we're still only within the first 2 months of the year. And I generally by the end of the May or mid-May, you know what you have. So let's hope that has a positive effect, that he catches fire and really leads the league like he, with power numbers like he did last year. That's only going to help and make baseball just as exciting as the Leafs are now.
All right, so don't forget the Leafs, 7 p.m. right here, Scotiabank Arena, Game 5. Also, the Blue Jays, Tampa, 7 p.m. at the Rogers Center. Toronto Scepters, Game 4 here happening in Minnesota at 7 p.m. And also, BMO Field's got the TFC going on. So a lot of things happening in Toronto tonight. But enjoy the Maple Leaf game. We'll be back here Friday to preview it. Thanks a lot, guys. You've been watching Maple Leafs Forever. Thanks, Mark.
Maple Leafs Forever on the Fired Up Network.
Fired Up Network.